All right, does South Carolina need to start shopping for a new offensive coordinator? Rumors swirling that Dowell Loggains is headed to App State. We talk about who could replace him and if he is actually gone. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. I hope all of you are having a fantastic Saturday afternoon and early evening. We got a bit of an emergency pod, some stuff to go over, some important stuff to go over, mainly that South Carolina might need a new offensive coordinator. So before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everybody who makes Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sorry, bear with me. It is halftime of the SEC Championship game, and we are recording this. Like I said, bit of an emergency pod. Nothing crazy yet. Nope. In real time, it has been made official. According to the App State official account, Dowell Loggains is set to become the new head coach there. Before we get into that, you guys know I have to pay the bills. So let me say one thing real quick about our friends at Game Time, and then we will get into the show. Remember, the Game Time app is everything you need for all of your ticketing needs. Today's episode is brought to you by them. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters, for $20 off your first purchase. Make sure you go check them out right now. So let's get into the show. Like I said, so let me walk you through how this is going to go first, just so you kind of know where my mindset is right now. So the SEC Championship game is on right now. They just started the second half as I'm hitting record on this. News started around kickoff of this game that there were rumors that Dowell Loggains was set to become the new – oh, boy, now my phone, of course, is blowing up. Yes, this is – okay, so this Dowell Loggains is set to become the new offensive coordinator – the new head coach at App State. The news is official now. It was made official. They just posted it for App State's site and also on 3. It's about as official as it can get. I will tell you this. There's not a ton of info I have right now, right? Like I'm in Atlanta. I was covering the SEC Championship earlier today. Did Feinbaum yesterday. Like that's the only reason we didn't have a show yesterday. So I wanted to get a show out as quickly as possible. It's like I said, it's a bit of an emergency pod. My goal for this is we're going to talk about Loggains, his impact on this team, why he would go is a little bit kind of odd timing, it feels like, and frustrating timing. Breaking up the nucleus of what you have here in general, and then talk about just right off the bat, early candidates that you could look into. Now, again, this news just happened. Like it just now happened. So I want to make sure that you guys understand, I have notes and things like that, but we're not going to get into a full deep dive of replacements and anything like that. This is not a final list. This will be a ongoing thing that I'm sure is not going to be made official or changed in the next couple of days, I would imagine. It does feel abrupt. I know Shane Beamer was in Atlanta this morning. We were down there at Fanfare, and he was kind of politicking for South Carolina's case to get into college football playoff, a case that I have been banging the drum for, as you guys have, and think that needs to be listened to, just in general, right? I'm sure he was aware that this was in the works, but that's where we stand right now in terms of this is the information that I have. So that being said, it is very apparent Loggains is moving on. Where do you go from here? What does the move mean? All right, so let me just give you my initial reaction to it and the frustration I think that initially comes with it. Now, one, you don't want to lose anybody right now. The nucleus of what you have in place, you clearly don't want to lose that because of what you've been able to do over the last several weeks in the second half of the season. That I struggle with that part of it because it's like, man, it feels like you finally got something going. You made such a vast improvement in so many different areas on offense, especially, right? Like the defense has been the defense the whole time. The schedule's been the schedule. Like I said, at the start of the season, Beamer was great. Sellers came on strong, but like the biggest area of improvement you wanted to see going into this year wasn't on the defensive side of the ball. It was on the offensive side of the ball. And so to see any part of that and the components that add up to it break or change, that kind of sucks. Like, you're clearly going to lose guys to the draft. You're going to lose guys to the portal and whatever. Immediate reaction to that is it sucks. It sucks, and it's a little bit perplexing. And I don't know Dowell Loggains. I would venture to say I probably won't know Dowell Loggains after I came on here like an idiot and said that he deserved to lose his job halfway through the season. I'll get into the numbers of what he did in the second half of the season because it's night and day. Maybe we're responsible for giving him the kick in the pants that he needed. But I don't know Dowell Loggains, so I don't know. I don't know what he's thinking. Like if he's always wanted to be a head coach, or if that's been the case, I don't know. He has been a coach for 16 plus years in the NFL and college. Right? And for all but two of them that he spent at Arkansas before he came to South Carolina, he was an OC or a quarterback's coach, right? Like at South Carolina, at Arkansas, he was the tight ends coach. But I'll read you his coaching history right here. Tennessee Titans offensive quality control coach. This is 2008 and 9. Titans quarterback coach, 2010, 2011. Then he gets promoted to be the Titans OC in 2012, 2013. I don't know how that went. I'm assuming not great because he ends up in Cleveland 2014 as a quarterback's coach, Bears quarterback's coach in 2015. Then he gets promoted to Bears offensive coordinator 2016 and 17. Then he goes to Miami to be offensive coordinator in 2018. Then he goes in the division to become the offensive coordinator and quarterback's coach of the New York Jets from 2019 to 2020. And then, like I said, Arkansas tight ends coach for 2 seasons. So I'm not saying it's a surprise that he would want to be a head coach. You know, like a lot of coaches want to work up the ladder and get into that next level of the job. And that's what he's doing. Like a lot of us, I love my job. Sometimes I would love to be my own boss, right? And be in charge of everything and see how good of a job I could do if I'm running things. And this is a good opportunity for him. App State is a G5 program with a ton of upside. It's a very marketable program. It is a program that has been really successful at times going into, this new era of college football. So great opportunity for him. It is surprising, though, because you have been a coach for 16 years, and in 14 of the 16 years, you've only had 2 roles, OC, quarterback's coach, sometimes both, one time both. So interesting, right? I also think it's interesting because going into this season, I don't think any of us were thinking, man, Dowell Loggains might be so good this year, and this offense might be so good, he's going to leave to be a head coach. From the start of this job, and I'm just being transparent with you guys, from the start of this job and running Locked On Gamecocks, there was stuff I heard from the outside of oh, Beamer's on the hot seat. Talk about the hot seat. That clearly was untrue from anyone inside the program and close to the program, all that kind of stuff. You heard stuff back and forth maybe Sellers and what's his name, Robbie Ashford, they're still competing. It was pretty clear that Sellers was going to end up being the starter. There's been rumors and murmurs, nothing crazy, but there's been rumors and murmurs throughout preseason and season of just whatever, like there is everywhere. This hasn't been something that's been on my radar, and maybe I'm just being bad at my job. I don't know, but this has not been on my radar. So it is a surprise to tune into the SEC championship today and sit here and then hear all of that. I am glad that I chose not to go down to the stadium to cover the game because this is clearly something that needed to be addressed during it. I don't think I could have done a Locked On Gamecocks from the press box. I'll say that. So that probably would have gone over pretty poorly if I was, doing an emergency video podcast about the South Carolina offensive coordinator at a Georgia-Texas SEC championship. Side note, if you've watched any of this game, it's very clear I will stand by the take that I've had for 2 straight weeks that South Carolina is the best team in the SEC. There's nothing about this game that's making me change my mind on that. We'll see how everything plays out tomorrow. We don't have to get into that right now. Now, before we move on about candidates and stuff, I do want to talk about the impact that Loggains has had because it's been better than we really thought. And you need to also understand what we're replacing. I know a lot of times as fans, it's like, and even times out here and times like throughout the season, you've sometimes had this idea of like, oh, well, this like Loggains has not been great at times, and they've underwhelmed last year, especially in the run game and all this other stuff, and a lot of the offensive line. But like, you need to know what you're replacing and how much productivity you're going to need. Also, the kind of system you had in place. Like Loggains clearly, this is nothing to do with Spencer Rattler, but Loggains clearly did better. His system did better. His play calling was better with a guy like Lenore Sellers than it was with Spencer Rattler. And again, that is not anything about Spencer Rattler in a negative way. That's just like maybe it took a year and a half to get everyone on the same page, or maybe for him to find his own groove or whatever, his best communication style, any of those things. But over the last 6 games, this is the best offense you have seen at South Carolina in several years. And the guy running the show is a dual threat guy that's built like Cam Newton and can outrun everybody in the field and that kind of stuff. Maybe that also is something that is clearly a help to a guy like Dowell Loggains. You know what else it is, guys? You know what else it is? If you're trying to bring someone into South Carolina and get them to come be the offensive coordinator for you, there are times in the past where it's like, I don't know if Dowell Loggains was the first choice necessarily. I just don't know if he was. I'm not saying he was or wasn't. I don't know if that would have been the first choice. You are in a very, very strong leveraging position at South Carolina right now to say, you know what? We're going to go out and attract a really, really good offensive coordinator, because look what we have. Not only are we a great place to be with a great culture, tons of great resources, an NIL collective that is up and coming. You have the top 10 facilities in the country. And oh, by the way, that's not us banging the drum for that. That's 247 Sports, who's going all around the country looking at, in the windows of everyone's stuff on the marketplace. Like Oregon, Bama, A&M, Texas, like Carolina's in the top 10 with those guys, right? So not only you have all that at your disposal, by the way, when you get to come, peek behind the curtain and see what's under the hood, whatever cliche I could throw out there, like you have a one of one athlete at quarterback. Mom, I'm recording the podcast. So I'll have to call you back. Every time, guys. So you have a one of one type of athlete at quarterback. You've got a one of one type athlete at receiver that is starting to have the lights come on, right? You've got weapons all over the place, and that's not even including what you're about to bring in this class and what you could also go out and get in the portal. So you are in a high leveraging situation if you're South Carolina and say, we're going to go out and get that guy. We're going to go try and get that guy so we can sit here and then go like moving forward, we can go out and get the best possible name, and also a guy that that's going to want to come in. And I'm not saying use this as a stepping stone, but this is a great spot for anyone to come in here and say, look at all the weapons I have at my disposal. That when I am, if I am in a situation where I want to become a head coach at some point down the road, this is only going to make it easier. This is not a rags to riches thing I got to build. This is not a complete remodel of the only analogy I can think of right now is like a house flipping situation. Like, this is not one of those situations. This is, hey, we have what is a restored super muscle car, and we're just going to give you the keys. Like, it's got all the giddy up you need. It's got all the bells and whistles you need. Trust me. Go make it run. Like, that's what you're going to have here. So before we get into that, I do want to give one quick little break, and then we will come back. We will talk about what we are losing with Dowell Loggains going to App State. And also, I'm going to give you 3 potential candidates that should be, I'm not saying at the top of the list, but 3 guys that could potentially be an OC here and have success. And I'll give you a gold, silver, and bronze package of which one to choose from. Locked On Gamecocks continues next. All right, guys, welcome back into Locked On Gamecocks. Good show so far, I think. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Before we get into the next part of it, I do want to talk about our friends at the Game Time app. You guys have heard me talk about them nonstop. If you were in Atlanta this weekend and wanted to catch the SC Championship, even though the Gamecocks were in it, Game Time is who I would have told you to go use. Just a fantastic company, fantastic partner. Can't say enough positive things about them. But I do want to remind you of all the fantastic things you can find with them, right? It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can filter only incredible deals on great seats. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. You also have all-in pricing, so it shows you your total cost up front before you ever have to click buy or find, and which means there's no surprise fees or anything like that as well. It is a all-in-one beautiful masterclass of how the ticketing industry should be, especially from a customer service standpoint. There's so many ways to save money on tickets, no matter when you buy. Game Time Picks shows you only the best values on tickets, last-minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. They also have exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more, and zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big-time savings. Now, before we get out of here, I'm going to remind you one time again, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks, y'all. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, let's get back into the Dowell Loggains situation, and then I'm going to give you 3 potential names that'll be on everyone's shortlist or on South Carolina's shortlist to start this process. Now, when you talk about what we're losing with Dowell Loggains, I think there's a number of ways you have to look at this. So you guys know I love stats and numbers and deep dives, and I've got a mini one that I've already done here that I'll get into. So these are the numbers you had in the current and the rank in the SEC for each of these after the 2024 season. Points per game, 31.6. That was 6th best in the SEC. Yards per game, 409.3. That was 9th best out of the 16 teams. Yards per play, 5.95. That ranked 10th in the conference. Rush yards per game, 188.9, which was 3rd best. However, on the other side of that, yards per carry, 4.49, which was 9th. So you had the the 3rd most yards per game, but only the 9th best yards per carry. Gave a lot of run. I mean, basically, there's just a lot of run plays that were pretty productive, but not as productive as you might see. Yards per game passing, 220.3. That ranked 10th. Now, this is kind of like the inverse of the rushing stat I just told you. 10th in the league in total yards per game passing. That doesn't really tell the whole story. Yards per attempt, 8.6. Guys, that was 3rd. Lenore Sellers in his first year as a starter, 3rd best in the SEC in yards per attempt at 8.6. For Gamecock quarterbacks, that's fantastic. Now, there's 2 ways I want to look at this because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can't replace Dowell Loggains, but replacing him and what he's been over the last 6 games is going to be difficult. I went on, I think it was me and Alyssa Lang were talking about this the other day on Sirius XM. You can make the case that Dowell Loggains has been one of, if not the best coordinator in the SEC over the last half of the season with the turnaround, not just with Sellers, but in general over that course of time or that span of time. You also want to go back and look at what he had a year ago, right? His first season was, I'm not saying it's a disaster, but it was not great. And I think when you had a quarterback that was the first drafted quarterback in program history since 1990, so in 34 years, and it's still the numbers are that bad. Now, it's also a feather in your cap because of what you had to replace going into this year and the success that you ended up having. But these are the numbers you had a year ago in his first year, 26 points per game. So and that ranked 12th out of 14 teams. That goes up almost 6 points per game this year. Yards per game, 363.1. That ranked 9th. You increase that by over 40 yards per game. Yards per play, 5.55, kind of similar. Passing yards per game, 278 overall, which was 4th best in the league. So it went down this year, but your yards per attempt went up by a half yard and ranked from 7th last year and ranked 3rd this year. Here's the one that was the biggest one that made the biggest impact, right? That was very clear. Rush yards per game last year, you had 85.1 rushing yards per game, which was last in the SEC. And even worse, Yards per carry, you had 2.77 yards per carry. That ranked dead last by a significant amount. It was awful. It was awful. And a lot of that's on the offensive line, sure. It's also, like maybe some of the talent you had or whatever. But you look at the increase in productivity from last year to this year. Dowell Loggains' offense went from dead last in the SEC in rushing yards per game and rushing yards per carry to third in rushing yards per game. Oh boy, this kid just got sacked and fumbled. This game is horrible, by the way. You went from dead last in the SEC in rush yards per carry and rush yards per game to third this year in rush yards per game, and also increased your yards per carry by almost 2 yards, which is incredible. It's just an incredible job. Now, the other part of it that is like the most worrisome in replacing, okay? The most worrisome in replacing. I'm going to take you through the first half of the season numbers versus the last 6. And this is what I'm most concerned about in terms of losing. If you would have told me Dowell Loggains was leaving after that Ole Miss game, as I said on this podcast, I would have been fine with it. You ranked so low. We did the deep dive, guys, a while back, and it was, oh man, I should have brought this up beforehand. That's defense. Hold on, bear with me here. This is great radio. Good job, Chris. Just a fantastic job. I'm obviously being sarcastic because that's not a fantastic job right now. Whatever, I can't find it. But in the first, okay, here you go. You ranked 10th or worse in the SEC in 22 of 30 offensive categories. You ranked 13th or worse in 18 of 30, which is 60%, right? I did 30 stats, and then you ranked that poorly in the SEC. The only thing you ranked in the top 5 or better in the conference was punting. That's it. Okay. Now you look at the first half of that season, of this last season, your margin of victory, your total points, margin of victory was plus 43. So you were winning games by an average of 7.2 points per game, or 7.14 points per game. In your last 6, that number jumped to 20.3. You tripled it in the last 6. And let's keep in mind, you played several ranked teams at the end of the year. It's not like you just had an easier schedule, right? You had Akron in the first half and Old Dominion in the first half, and the last half you had Wofford, sure, but you had 5 SEC teams, multiple road games, very tough, right? Not 5. You had 4 SEC games and Clemson was a top 12 team. Your points per game in the first half of the season, 27.5. In the second half, 35.7. Over a point more than a touchdown per game. You had 8.2 more points per game in the second half of the season versus the first. Tremendous. Yards per game, this is impressive. 362.3 in the first 6 games. That went up 110.5 yards per game. And in the last 6, South Carolina averaged 472.8 yards of offense per game. Think about that. That's like, I'm looking at the numbers now, and you talk about from a like offensive standpoint, you put up over 400 yards of offense in the first 6 games one time, and it was against Akron. One time. In the last 6, you put up over 400 yards 5 out of 6 games. The only one you did it was Oklahoma, and that's because the Oklahoma game was over in the first quarter, and you had like multiple non-offensive touchdowns. So over 110 yards per game more in the second half of the season versus the first. Yards per play, 5.2, which isn't bad. 5.2 in the first 6 games. That skyrocketed up to 6.95 in the second half. Rushing was kind of similar. It went up 27 yards per game, whatever. The passing, though, you went up 66 yards per game in the second half of the season versus the first. And more impressively, you doubled your touchdown production. You had 7 total in the first half of the season, 7 total touchdowns. You also had 0 touchdowns in a game, just as many times as you had a touchdown pass in a game in the first 6. You threw for 0 touchdown passes in 3 of the 6 games, right? In the second half, you ended up throwing 13 in the last 6. So what worries me is like the trajectory of this offense and the way Lenore Sellers looked and all that kind of stuff. Like that doesn't need to dip, right? Like you have a ton of returning talent, especially at the receiver position. You think about the lack of returning production this team had going into this season. I have really talked my hands a lot today. But you think about the lack of production you had coming into the season, right? And then what that looked like the rest of the year. Hold on, we've got this game it's like a Big Ten championship that's happening right now. Anyway, I say all that to say, as much of the ire that I had and the frustrations that I had and a lot of fans had in the first 6 games of the year, there is no denying the incredible turnaround that we all knew happened, but statistically, that's what it looks like, right? You got to figure out a way to replace that. Now, when we come back, I'm going to tell you the 3 candidates that I, right off the bat, would look at. And then tomorrow, we will get into a much bigger deep dive of people to look at, other teams like that, or other candidates, and we'll do that throughout the week as well. We'll also take a look at the with whatever bowl announcements come out at noon tomorrow as well. But when we come back, we will do a quick look at 3 candidates that I will give you. Like I said, gold, silver, bronze package, whichever one do you think they end up with. We will talk about that as well. Before we do, I want to tell you about our friends at FanDuel. And guys, it is in the middle or the early part of December now. So make sure you are tackling NFL and college football action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you are new on FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back. Locked on Gamecocks continues next. All right, we're back. Oh, we're gonna do a quick little episode. Why am I the most long? I haven't even had caffeine today. Just the most long-winded person in the world. I appreciate you guys tuning in though and listening to my nonsense for this long. Let's close out with this. I'm gonna give you 3 candidates that I would choose from, and I'll start with the lowest candidate. This one just popped in my mind strictly because of recency, a little bit of relevancy. I don't even know where this guy is at right now. I could probably look it up right now. So I will. So here is somebody that I would potentially look at. This is my bronze, right? This is of the 3 that I'm giving today. I'm not saying this guy is going to be a target, but a name that's worth mentioning and looking at. Okay. Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees is the tight ends coach and pass game specialist coach for the Cleveland Browns right now. I don't know how much of an interest he has to come back to college. Here's what I know about Tommy Rees. He was the OC at Notre Dame, and he was the OC at Alabama last year. The thing with Tommy Rees, I didn't think he was a great offensive coordinator for the first half of the season last year at Alabama. But one thing he is going to do with how he ran the ship at his offense at Notre Dame and at Alabama is they are going to have an emphasis on the run game. In 2 of the 4 seasons he was the OC at Notre Dame, I think they ran the ball like over 64% of their plays. So it's a heavy emphasis on the run game. That aligns directly with what South Carolina already has in place. And also when you have guys like Sean Elliott on staff, that coincides exactly with how they also want to approach games and approach an offensive style going into next year. Tommy Rees also, one thing he did a really good job, I think the best thing he did all last year was when he was the OC at Alabama, he obviously had Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe is also a one-of-one type unicorn athlete that is on the field. When he's on the field, he's the best athlete on the field no matter what. Like that is who Jalen Milroe is. He is going to run a 4.3 40. He has a great arm. The thing with Tommy Rees was he kind of wanted to run like, we're going to run this intermediate passing routes. We're going to take some deep shots, but like, we're not going to use your legs. We're not going to use your legs. Once they got to November, Tommy Rees finally let Jalen Milroe start using his legs with designed runs and using that in the run game. And then the offense kind of evolved to these in the second half. I'm sorry, from November on. And you even saw the SEC championship game where I think when Georgia came back, they were down 3. You saw new wrinkles of the offense that they hadn't unveiled all year. So that sort of big brain, like big picture idea of how to approach the offense, I loved. The way he handled Jalen Milroe over the last month and a half of the season, I think he would do well with a guy like Lenore Sellers. Again, just a name that's been in this conference recently and had experience with a similar quarterback. Because let's face it, like you don't need to make the hire solely based on Lenore's, but he is going to be a large part of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like everyone knows that. Here is the second guy I would give you, and he's already in the building, and he's been around forever. And it's Mike Shula. Mike Shula, at the very least, is familiar with everything you already have in place. He has relationships with the guys. He's also been a head coach in this league. It was a while ago. It was 18 years ago when he was the head coach at Alabama. But it's also a guy who, let's look up his resume real quick. He has been in South Carolina for not too long. He's a senior offensive assistant coach, right? He's kind of an assistant. But let's look at this as well. Shula spent his entire coaching career in the NFL after, other than the 4 years he was the head coach at Alabama. Like he has been, I think he was a OC in Buffalo. Here, I'll pull it up real quick so we have all the factual info. So I go to Wikipedia for factual info. He's been an offensive analyst at South Carolina this past season, right? He was quarterbacks coach for the Broncos, offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach for the Giants. That was within the last 5 years. Offensive coordinator for Carolina when they had Cam Newton. That is a comp people are making, whether it's fair or not with Lenore's. Physically, it makes sense. Okay. So that's another thing, right? I don't know what he wants to do in terms of recruiting. I don't know what he wants to do in terms of his coaching career, or if this is just something that he has enjoyed having a role that's kind of taken like a step back and not having to be as hands-on and so demanding. But it is a guy who has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience. And also when he's been at his best at times, like Carolina, you think about some of those teams that they had then, it was with a quarterback that is similar at least to Lenore Sellers. Last but not least, this is a guy that needs to be number one. This is the guy you go after first, like flat out, unequivocally. Like the first phone call I make is to this person, and it's Brennan Marion. Brennan Marion is a young. He is 37. Yeah, 37 years old. Offensive coordinator at UNLV. UNLV has the 4th best offense in the country right now. They went 10-3 this season. They're fantastic. Now he's worked his way up. This was his first role as an OC and quarterbacks coach at UNLV over the last 2 seasons. Okay. He's been a head coach before, apparently. As I'm learning right now, I don't know where that was. I don't think it was anyway. But he has had one of the best offenses and most innovative offenses that is also predicated off of like the RPOs in the country. He is going to be one of the it names for offensive coordinators. Like Michigan's going to go after him for sure, like for certain. Now here's the thing that I would be like, I think if you're Shane Beamer, you go out and say, here's what we're willing to spend. I know that Barry Odom is making like $400,000 or $600,000 as the head coach at UNLV. I can't imagine he's making much more than that as the OC. Now, yeah, so Barry Odom's making $400,000 a year as the head coach at UNLV. There are rumors that Odom might become the head coach at West Virginia. That is one of the first calls they're going to make. He is going to be on their short list to go to be the head coach at West Virginia. If he's making $400,000, I can't imagine the OC is making much more, or he's probably not making more. I think you put throw a bag at this guy and say $1.5 million is like what we're willing to spend. That's a good price for coordinators in this league. You can go up to $2 million, but that's a guy who I think personally is worth every penny, especially with what here's the importance of what you have to know before you make this purchase. Okay. This is going into next year. We don't know who all is going to go to the NFL. We don't know who's getting in the portal. We also don't, like I said, we don't know who we're getting in from the portal. But as of right now, you're approaching the 2025 season as we are going to be front runners and favorites in this conference and compete for not only a spot in the college football playoff, but compete for a national championship. You have a Heisman caliber level quarterback, right? You have a defense that has been solid, and even with people that are going to lose, should still be good next year. But you have the ability for this offense to become one of the best in the country, right? You have one-of-one athletes on that side of the ball on your two deep with only more talent coming in. And I keep saying, guys, if you get an offensive line, like if South Carolina can just have an offensive line, I don't know who's going to beat them. Like, it's like, like that seems to be the case at times. Like, but you have to approach this higher with the same mentality of, okay, this upcoming year, and I hate to use this reference, but I'm going to anyway. You look at the way Miami and Ole Miss approached their seasons. Now, I know that it didn't work out well for either of them. I get it. But I kept saying this. They approach their seasons as like the same way Major League Baseball teams approach their offseason. Or the same way Major League Baseball teams approach like a trade deadline in a year where they think they can compete for a World Series title. And what I mean by that is they went all in. Like they spent a ton in the portal. They brought in all these different people and players at positions and all that kind of stuff. Like they approached this season as an all-in type situation to go win. I'm not saying that's what you have to do this year. Like if you don't win this year, you're never going to win. I'm not saying that at all. But you don't know how long you're going to have a guy like Lenore Sellers because of his talent. So you do need to be in a mode that is the mindset at least has to be not just win now, but we have the capability of winning a national championship or competing for a national championship next year. This hire cannot be, we got a diamond in the rough. This needs to be a home run hire. And I hope Shane Beamer knows that. I'm sure he does, because I think he knows also what's riding on next season. All right, that is all for today's show. It was much longer than the quick show I thought we were going to do. I appreciate you guys joining us. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We will have a bowl recap episode and figure out where everyone's going, where South Carolina's going, our reactions to it and everything above. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Saturday, and we'll talk to y'all then. Go Cox.